Yeah, so my presentation, for my presentation, we're going to be looking at Europa Universalis 5, a strategy game made by Paradox that, unlike many others, actually represents colonialism. It actually has mechanical colonialism, so I thought it would be a great idea for us to kind of look at this mechanic and see how exactly is it going to be interacting. So, quick side note before we do this, the game EU5, it takes place between the years 1337 and 1830. And between that area is basically that is the late Middle Ages. It was like around late Middle Ages began the Renaissance to the beginning of the Victorian era. So you're covering 500 years of history with every faction that we know of that existed at that period of time at your time present on the map. And you're going to be dealing with, like, since you're going to be running through, like, the age of discovery, the rise of colonialism, you're going to have colonialistic mechanics. So, how you're going to be looking at these mechanics they're forcing you to, is that they're forcing you to actually do colonialism in order to do certain things. Like you have to colonize countries to get more resources. Colonize. You have to settle countries to get more resources. You have to manage them from overseas, and you have to deal with their Native American tribes, which have a lot of varied outcomes if you know history and you know how strategy games work. And especially when you have someone like me who's very interested in history, it's really fun to just like dig into these aspects and see, hey, how do I like try to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past? And then you repeat the mistakes of the past anyway because you fall into the same trap. So that's something I really have to look out for. All right, so in the game, let's say you want. All right, so as an example, let's say you wanted to colonize Plymouth. The first thing you're going to have to do is think about, okay, what resources are going to be there? How fast can I claim it? And how do I stop my rivals from taking it first? Because it's kind of a race. Because it's 100% a race to get large as a foothold in the Americas as possible before you're encountering other powers, which leads to lots of violence and conflicts with Native Americans because you're very stressed and because you want to keep stemming quickly and you kind of and this sounds terrible, but you do view them as a nuisance because they keep wrecking your things, raiding you all the time, launching rebellions for reasons you still don't know. And that's kind of the sort of downsides of like expanding because it's always is a constant flow of having to expend resources to retain those colonies, build them up, and maintain that empire, which is extremely difficult and also very historical, fortunately. Now, here's what I'm going to be saying, like right here, as inclusion versus perspective. Yes, Native Americans are in the game. You can play as Native American factions. And they don't, you don't view it as empty. You don't really view like unclaimed land as empty because they have resources there. They have like people there. They have like local tribes that aren't on the map that you have to like convert, kill, or I don't know, kick out. Like I usually go with convert, personally, but unfortunately, kill option was used far more than I would like. And the whole point you have to do that is so Native Americans are basically, as I've said before, treated like obstacles, which is horrible. But when you're the colonizing power, that's how you're viewing everything because you're viewing everything from this brutal self-interest, which can be very terrifying as we're about to go dig and see, as we're about to see later with the economics, which, oh boy, it makes me go, oh, which, oh boy, is horrible. Like, as you can see here, even if we're going to be showing all of Amsterdam, and as we're expanding over here, you're as you want as many colonies and as valuable colonies as possible to create more trade ports, so you create more trade routes, so you can have ports that can administer raw materials to build up fleets, ships, systems. And also you want taxes, so you can fund and pay for it all. So you will try to target gold, something that happened historically, which almost killed Jamestown because they thought there was gold. So they sent miners instead of farmers, which did not go well. Regardless, with all that in mind. And when you're having this more mindset of I need more resources, everything will become secondary because you're thinking you're doing this for the betterment of your country, which means you're gonna screw over everyone else for your own benefit. It's just been international relations since the dawn of man, and one city tried to kill the other city over a dispute on where their two cities ended. Anyway, just give me a moment. As you know, that I've already seen me talk before about my rationalizations, which you can sum up as imperial logic. There's another fascinating thing I always came up with when you're working my games, these games, is kind of I will fall in. There is this old myth. I think it's called the Black Myth, where the English spread all this propaganda that, oh, look at how horrible the Spanish are treating the native populations. Look how they treat the Aztecs. Look at the Incas, the Mayans, well, okay, not the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incans, everyone in Mexico, many in the Southwest United States, something like that. They're highlighting how horrible these people are. So which is something you also do as a player, because you're also coming in as saying, look how horrible the British are, look how horrible everyone else are. I want to colonize everything first. I want to put everything first. The natives under my rule, because I'm going to be more gentle, and I'm going to be more kinder, and hopefully will be saving them from other evil colonial empires who are no doubt thinking the same thing and will do the same thing. And that's sort of which is something I really find fascinating, is that you're actually falling into the same mindsets that some people felt historically. And as you see from Endor, just because you believe that does not mean in reality you are does not mean in reality you are not as shitty as everyone else. As we're going to dig into here. All right, so first off, the whole reason I'm using Endor in particular is because in EU5, you're the colonial empire, so you're looking at the empire at scale. You're looking at a map, and you're trying to make everything look like you, as you can see here from France expanding, where it really should be England, and somehow England is over there, and France conquered England. Oh boy, I forgot about that game. Anyway, sorry about that tangent. But you're looking at, so as a player, you're looking at everything scale with your colonial empire. Andor is basically you're looking at the small scale of what it's like to be living on the fringes of your empire, of like how people are interacting with the colonial regime you created. And since Andor's themes are about rebellion and why they oppose the empire, it's really showing here that it's really fascinating to show because if you're like an EU5 player who's played these empires, you're seeing how people feel to be living in it, and if they and it can and it makes it's very unsettling because you have this mythical fact that you're the good guy, but when you look at it through the lens of others, you're really the bad. You're really the bad guy because you think you're better than everyone else, but you're still doing all those terrible things that people hate you for and will rebel over, which is something I always found interesting. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at this all through the environmental perspective, and despite what you might think of main games, there is a really there are many reasons why you might actually be more generous with resources. And it's mostly played in its economic systems. Yes, you most people are like, oh, we're gonna be exploiting land as quickly as possible. No, that's not a good idea because you have to be careful because money. Because because for the best of all reasons, money. And you have a limited supply of gold or ducats or florins, and you have a limited amount of money to spend. And the resources, the more you're extracting the resources, it doesn't really, it may lower the cost, but it can also cause it to go higher. The average cost of the item increase. So you're dealing with this two-front aspect of, yes, yes, I could over extract this resource, but I don't think I can afford it, so I'm going to have to be managing it very carefully in order to not exploit too much so it can still be profitable. Which which is accurate. Which is accurate to many of how many colonial settlers do fall. Many colonial settlers really did actually believe in something like that. We're really careful about not over exploiting resources, but there are also many colonists, and colonial empires that were extract everything, and they really backfire amazing. So it's really interesting to see that show in the game where you're incentivized to be a steward, not because not because of any sort of moral value, but because you want to be cheap, which I always, yeah, you just want to be cheap. And apparently being a steward's cheaper. Anyway, so the perspective so for this game, it's really teaching you the perspective of how you fall in the core of how it gets normalized, how why people are doing this, why it's really rewarding. But it's also showing you it doesn't glorify it as you would imagine. It shows its horrors. It makes you uncomfortable because you are looking at events where you are displacing entire native populations and you feel 100% guilty. Which I always found interesting is that instead of glorifying, found interesting about this mechanic is that instead of like showing how glorifying it is by making Empire feel efficient and rewarding, it's showing that yes, it feels efficient, it feels rewarding, but you're also being confronted through in-game events of the personal impact you have on these people, of what you're doing. And I feel like that balance was fascinating because it's saying, yes, you traditionally in strategy games, you are doing a good job. However, you are still, however, at the end of the day, you're still acting like a monster because you are displacing many people from their homes. It's taking what is theirs and making it yours. And I always thought that was really cool to look at.